Leaders eat last. It's a custom in the U.S. military where officers in the field wait to eat until they are sure that those in their care have already had their fill. Only after their subordinates have had all that they need, all that they require, and their rest, do they then get their respite. But it's not just a common practice in the U.S. military. It's mentioned in the Bible as well. In there, Jesus said, "He who wishes to be first must be last, and servant of all." You know, that type of leadership is something I've been blessed to be able to see an awful lot of examples of. I think back to my grandparents, Ronald and Nancy Rivette, and they exemplified this to an extraordinary level. Uh, some of the One of the first stories that I can think of to begin with is the story of my grandfather, who at age 16 forged his father's signature and ran off to fight in World War II because he couldn't bear the idea that his four older brothers would be off serving. He had to be a part of the action too. He was willing to kind of risk himself and to risk everything to make sure that his brothers knew that he would be there with them. You know, when he returned, he married Nancy, my grandmother, and they raised 7 children and had 20 grandchildren. And the way that these two worked and the way they cared for the children, they were like a giant magnet, because 6 of their 7 children lived within a 5 to 10 minute drive of them when they became adults. And the only one that was farther than that away was only a 90-minute drive. She lived out in Walled Lake. That was my Aunt Barb. And so their house was constantly filled with the comings and goings of their own children and their grandchildren. And so they worked diligently to make sure that their house was always packed with extra groceries, extra canned goods. And people would come in and just they always made extras, leftovers constantly. And I'd watch my uncle stop in at lunchtime and grab themselves something to eat. They always made sure they took care of those who were their subordinates, those who were in their charge. And holidays were crazy. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, all of them. Everybody came. When one of my aunts or uncles couldn't make it, it was like a moment of notice. We all paid attention when one of our groups of cousins weren't there. Everybody came. The house was packed with people. But what always amazed me, because my grandparents used to babysit me quite a bit, is I would watch these two, Ronald and Nancy, just about kill themselves leading up to the actual holiday, making sure they had everything that they would need for the family, making sure that everyone had their favorite dishes that day, and that there would be enough food for everyone. And when the actual holiday came, they would watch and make sure everyone had what they needed before they themselves sat and ate. Leaders eat last. And on Sundays, they'd stop by, my grandma and grandpa, after church. They'd stop by, and they'd always bring with them maybe some leftovers that they had that week. They'd stop by our house. Maybe they bought too much of an item when they went grocery shopping, and they'd always drop it off, and they'd stay 5-10 minutes at the most, and then get up and leave. It used to amaze me. I couldn't figure out why they would stop by and then take off so quickly. Never made any sense to me. Until about 4 or 5 years down the road, when I got a little bit older and I was speaking with my cousins, I would find out that my cousins had similar visits every Sunday. You see, they had to stop and make sure that their children were okay, that they had a little something that they needed, and that they knew they were cared for. He who wishes to be first must be last, and servant of all. That's the type of leadership that I hope to bring in any position that I'm ever in. And it's a type of leadership I would like to be able to bring to our county government. Governmental seats of leadership, like the one that I'm running for, they don't exist so that someone gets a pension out of it. They don't exist so that someone gets health care out of a part-time job that many of our constituents can't even afford for themselves. These positions exist to serve. You are to be the eyes, the ears, and the voice for those people who elected you. You're there to serve. That's what I hope I will have the opportunity to do. August 4th, primary election coming up. I'm Jamie Johnson for Bay County Commissioner in District 7. Leaders eat last. He who wishes to be first must be last and servant of all. I hope you let me be the servant for our community. Have a great day, everybody.